Part 2, Subordination. A sentence, we have seen, is a group of words expressing a complete thought. A complete thought may contain any number of constituent thoughts. When a sentence contains only one thought, it is a simple sentence. For example, the man stands in the doorway. We usually think, so to speak, in simple sentences, our thoughts coming not in bundles, but successively and singly. The following might represent a train of thought. The man stands in the doorway. He is tall. Perhaps the doorway is low. His figure is shadowy. His clothes are dark. The house is dark within. One cannot distinguish the man's features. Obviously, we would be helplessly monotonous and ineffective way of expressing oneself on paper, no matter how accurately it represents our effortless, undirected thinking. The first step one naturally takes in endeavoring to avoid this jerky, incoherent manner of writing is the binding together of closely related ideas, trying them in bundles. So one writes, the man is tall, or else the doorway is low. His clothes are dark, and the house is dark within, etc. In each of these two sentences, we have united two ideas by using a coordinated conjunction that expresses the relation of the constituent thoughts to each other, or, expressing alternation, and addition. The result in each case is a compound sentence. It represents a complete thought composed of two independent constituent thoughts. Frequently, in telling a story, for instance, we express our thoughts in the form of a compound sentence containing a large number of constituent thoughts. Thus, the street was bare, and not a soul was visible, and the horse and buggy went crashing on, and then we saw a child just around the curve. It seemed doom. We were frantic with horror, but suddenly we saw a man in the doorway, but we didn't recognize him, and he blocked the way, and he turned out to be our friend Martin. Here are two compound sentences, one containing 4, the other 6 constituent thoughts. Each is a correct sentence because the result is one complete thought. First, the runaway horse was about to crush to death a child, and second, the child was unexpectedly saved by our friend Martin. But although these compound sentences are correct, they are only a little less monotonous and ineffective than that insufferable string of brief, simple sentences with which we began. Why is this so? We have bound our thoughts in bundles so that they might be regarded as orderly groups. But the result is still crude. What more can be done? The difficulty is that our bundles are like piles of logs of the same girth, neatly placed side by side and on top of each other, and capable of the addition of as many more of the same size as one cares to put on the pile. Adding a few logs to our second pile, we get this result. It stood there, looking at a bright pebble, and it didn't move at all, and it seemed doom. And we were filled with horror, and some of us turned pale as death. But suddenly we saw a man in the dark doorway, and he had doubtless been there right along. But we hadn't noticed him before, and he came out like a flash, and he blocked the way, and it was Martin. Now we do not want piles of dead logs, but living trees. Our sentences should not be built mechanically, they should grow as organisms grow. The tree might well be taken as a symbol of the skillful constructed sentence. A sentence may contain, like the sentence above, many constituent thoughts, but of these thoughts perhaps one will stand out as the main thought, the trunk, which divides into several subordinate thoughts, large branches, and which again divide into subordinate thoughts, small branches, etc. Our sentence, if rewritten on this principle, might read as follows. Standing there looking at a pebble, quite motionless and apparently doomed, the child filled us with such horror that some of us turned pale as death. But suddenly we saw a man in the dark doorway, whom we hadn't noticed before, though he had doubtless been there right along, and who, coming out like a flash, blocked the way. It was Martin. Here, instead of the 11 independent thoughts, we have 3. 1, the child filled us with horror. 2, suddenly we saw a man in the dark doorway. And 3, it was Martin. All of the other thoughts are subordinate to 1, A, standing there looking at a pebble, B, quite motionless, C, apparently doomed, D, such that some of us turn pale as death. And to 2, A, whom we hadn't noticed before, B, though he had doubtlessly been there all right along, C, coming out like a flash, and D, who blocked the way. And to 3, there are none. In general, the skillful writer is he who composes his sentences so that they are bound in subordination, independent constituent thoughts, who in each group of thoughts infallibly picks out the most important for the expression in the main clause or clauses and puts the subordinate thoughts in subordinate clauses and phrases. How shall we find the important thoughts? This question confronts even the most experienced writer. We have, let us say, a thought to express that is composed of a number of constituent thoughts. We are aware of the fact that some are more important than others, that it is almost bound to be true, but how shall we find the chief among them, the trunk? There are but 2 methods. First, we may experiment by writing our thoughts in various ways till we succeed in putting emphasis on the chief among them. When the sentence perfectly expresses our thought, we may be quite certain that the emphasis is properly distributed. Or, second, we may reflect, i.e., experiment mentally, reviewing the constituent parts of the whole thought until we see them so clearly that the subordinate ideas fall into the background and the most important idea or ideas stand forth luminously. How shall we express the subordinate thoughts? To express the most important thoughts is fairly easy. We have but to keep them in the forefront of the mind as we write the sentence, and they will find expression without much concern on our part. To express the subordinate thoughts, however, it is not so easy. They are not so vivid in our minds, they are remote and blurred like the background of a landscape, and they demand skill and phrasing on the account of a large number of relationships that may exist between the subordinate clause and the principal clause. Time, condition, cause, purpose, result, concession, relativity, comparison, means, reference, consecutiveness, correlation, adversity, relations that are to be expressed by the appropriate connective or by the use of a special construction. If, for example, the relation be condition, we may combine these 2 thoughts. It rains, the river will rise, either by the use of a connective, if it rains, the river will rise, or by the use of a special construction, should it rain, the river will rise. Fortunately, the English language is rich in connectives that express the various logical relationships. When there are a half-dozen connectives for us to choose among, we ought to be able to recall one immediately, and to recall the most suitable one after a little reflection. Most people have only a handful of connectives at their command, but their poverty is not due to that of the English language. Following is a table that includes some of the most useful connectives. Condition, if, in case that, provided that, unless. Time, when, before, after, while, since, till, until, as, whenever, as long as often as soon as. Place, where, wherever, whence, whither. Concession, though, although, even if, in spite of, notwithstanding, no matter how. Cause, since, as, because, in so much as, in that, now that. Purpose, that, so that, in order that, for the purpose of, with a view to, lest. Result, that, so, and then later, that, such, and then later, that. Comparison, as, then, as, and then later, as again, as, and then later, so, and then later, as, and such, and then later, as. Manner, as if, as though. Relation, as, who, which, what, that, whoever, whichever, whatever. The rest of this part is a number of exercises that you can complete on your own time. I will try to leave a link in the description to where you can see these exercises and hopefully the answers. Thank you for listening.